Hello and a warm welcome to everyone tuning in today with Vietnam Investment Review. Our discussion today will focus on Vietnam's logistics industry, which is one of the most rapidly growing sectors globally, with an impressive annual growth rate of 14 to 16% in recent years. Some experts believe that by 2015, this industry could make up to 20% of the country's GDP, positioning it as a highly attractive area for international investment. However, despite this remarkable progress, the sector is still facing a number of challenges, including infrastructure gaps, regulatory hurdles, and a shortage of skilled labor, to name a few. So how does this affect supply chain investments? In today's discussion, as part of a series leading up to Vietnam Investment Review's Logistics Summit at the end of this month, we'll dive into the real-world examples from businesses across the logistics ecosystem in Vietnam. But first, allow me to introduce the esteemed panel of guests. We have here with us in the studio Dr. Yap Kwong Weng, CEO of Vietnam SuperPort. And we have here Mr. Eric Herding, Managing Director, DSV Air and Sea Vietnam. Mr. Eric will be joining us virtually. Thank you so much, Dr. Yap and Mr. Eric, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. So without further ado, let's kick off our discussion by looking at the broader logistics sector in Vietnam. The first question for Mr. Eric Herding. DSV has been in Vietnam since 2001, and over the years, we've seen significant changes in the country's logistic infrastructure, particularly with seaports and airports. So from your perspective, how do you assess the transformation of Vietnam's logistics sector based on, compared to when you first entered the market?
Yeah, so of course the company's been here since 2001, as you mentioned. For me, it's not quite that long. I'm not quite so seasoned. I've been here since 2018, but it has been quite a journey, I would say, for the market and for the company, and for me personally over that period of time. We see actually a really commendable effort from the market to develop the infrastructure that's needed for what projects to be a very high growth across imports and exports of the future. So, we have, the new airport project in Long Tan in the south, which is very interesting. Already completed a lot of additional port capacity in Khai Map, which is in Vung Tau, which is the deep water port for the South Vietnam. Hai Phong Port has opened up 2 terminals on the deep water side, and then 4 terminals to follow very shortly, which is going to be very important as well, because there's so much new investment, so much production, so much happening in the north right now that the port needs to catch up a little bit on that topic. And I think that's actually the main challenge. It's just such a fast growth rate of the economy in general, and especially in terms of businesses that are involved in international trade, that the market has had to, and the logistics know-how, infrastructure, competency, equipment, what have you, it's playing catch up in a way at all times. So it's maybe a good problem to have for Vietnam, but certainly there are challenges that need to be overcome, and more development and improvement in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. That's the fascinating insight into how Vietnam's logistic infrastructure has evolved over the years. A lot of development, right, from north to south, Ho Chi Minh City, Vũng Tau, and Hai Phong, as you mentioned. But if we have to look at how the country measures up regionally, in your opinion, how does Vietnam's logistic infrastructure compare to other countries in the region, particularly as, in light of the country's ambition to become a regional goods transshipment hub?
Yes, actually, there is a measurement out there for this topic, which is called the Logistics Performance Index, and that actually covers not only countries like Vietnam and Malaysia and Thailand, but the whole globe. So we can see actually where Vietnam ranks against certain peers in that category, and then there's some categories where Vietnam ranks quite favorably. In other categories, there's a bit of catch-up to do against the peers in the region. So there's certainly a unique opportunity, I would say, in Vietnam because of the geographical proximity, especially to China, and what we see with a lot of investment flowing down here. So the concept of creating a regional hub in Vietnam is definitely on the table. What I see, which could be developed and expanded on, is that connectivity between the industrial parks, between the logistics parks, and especially between the ports, the seaports and the airports, the road network, the rail network, potentially also the inland waterway network. It's one of potentially Vietnam's greatest advantages is this inland waterway network, especially when we're talking about more sustainable supply chains into the future. So the other side of that would also be something like free trade zones or something approaching that, which would then allow companies to bring goods in and out of country more seamlessly, more efficiently, and with lower transaction costs. And then when you have that, then you have the environment where the high concentration of product production in Vietnam could then be complemented by what you could say is a regional distribution center model emerging here.
Right. And in light of all of the opportunities mentioned and all the advantages that you mentioned, including connectivity, geographical location, and so on, what opportunities do you think exist for logistic companies like yours, right? Like DSV?
Yes, the opportunities for us are where we see the growth and development of our customers' business. And then what we do in turn is bring our equipment, like we've done before with the emergence of renewable energy projects in Vietnam, for example, investing in equipment and bringing it in to Vietnam to execute those projects, or building up more warehousing and distribution centers. Looking to the future in terms of the workforce that we have and building training programs and recruiting in more workers and valuable employees to build that up. So when we see the growth and we get a little bit of a green light to prepare for that growth and to expand our operations in Vietnam accordingly.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Eric. And building on Mr. Eric's point about infrastructure and opportunities, we now turn to Vietnam SuperPort, which is also one of the big industry players working on creating more efficient logistics solutions for the country. So, Dr. Yap, how could you describe the current state of logistic connectivity in Vietnam, and particularly in regard to both hard and soft infrastructure?
Well, first of all, I think Vietnam is in a position, of strength and also in a position of growth. It's geographically and strategically positioned. China, followed by the rest of the ASEAN countries, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand. And these are very big countries, to be able to form connectivity with, to form a supply chain. And it is from that perspective, YCH Group has been working within the region for over 70 years. And we intend to bring some of our expertise, technology, manpower, and of course, skill sets, to not just, to bring goods and services across the connectivity spectrum, but also to build and develop our new asset known as the SuperPort in Vinh Phuc province. 83 hectares, multi-modal. We want to operate via air, land, and sea. We are connected to the rail, and we certainly want to, develop new advantages, with the new railway system, and also at the same time, I think, build upon the technology that we already have, in our retrieval systems, hardware, software, transfer them into Vietnam, and also co-create new technologies to level up the performance index, as what was mentioned earlier on before, in terms of critical infrastructure, technology as an enabler, to improve logistics as a whole.
Right. And as you mentioned, one of the solutions that Vietnam SuperPort is championing, as I understand, is the park within a park model, which integrates all supply chain management services in a single logistic hub. Yeah. So could you elaborate a little bit on how this model help address bottlenecks in logistics and what benefits it brings to businesses?
Yeah. So first of all, our company has decided to be completely sustainable. We have committed to net zero targets and to achieve net zero by 2040. That is ahead of the plans which many companies have pledged for. And we decided to go ahead because not only because we want to be at the forefront of the game, but also to structure new sustainability programs and initiatives to be able to help the operations move forward, such as greening the supply chain, looking at new energy efficient types of solutions within our operations, all the way, from distribution to suppliers, and also reaching out to the last mile connectivity. We intend to have a series of initiatives to green the supply chain. And this will eventually help consumers, this will eventually help suppliers, and also grow our businesses into a completely new form. We believe sustainability is here to stay. We want to be part of it, and we want to grow as much as we can, and capitalize or leverage on this space.
Right. Sustainability is indeed like a very big topic right now for Vietnam, and the potential of this model is very intriguing. However, I'm sure that the issue of scaling also comes with its own set of challenges. So what are the factors that needs to be addressed to scale this model? And in the context of regional competition and the need to connect transportation networks across the region?
Yeah. So in order to scale up or to bring about higher levels of, I would say, traction in sustainability, our concept very much, as you mentioned earlier on, the park in a park model, which means we will create a segment of net zero, fully capitalize on clean energy, solar, water, battery, using other sorts of renewable functions that can help to achieve complete net zero, taking into account the different scopes and achieving that. So we believe that that is possible, and we want to replicate the model within our logistics multi-model hub first. From there, we will adopt a plan in order to move it upwards. So if you look at it conceptually, it is a plan to move this particular green segment up into a wider scale. So we hope that we'll be able to use different formulas, to use different green types of energy that will be able to fuel this particular strategy that we have, our net zero plan. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very exciting plan. Now let's shift gear a little bit to some of the broader challenges that businesses face in this sector, particularly in terms of investment. Mr. Eric, every sector has its challenges, and logistics is no different. So what are some of the difficulties and obstacles that businesses, including DSV, is facing when investing in logistics in Vietnam? And are there issues related to infrastructure connectivities, linkages, or regulatory environment?
Yeah, certainly. So as I sort of alluded to before, our approach is to be at the ready where our customers need different services, and some of those services can be quite standardized, and others can be a little bit more specialized and require a different level of competency, equipment, and infrastructure or facilities to carry out. So when we look at maybe one specific example that I can share, an industry where they burn very bright for a period of time, and then it takes a little while for it to ramp up again. So if we talk about renewable energy projects and the logistics services that go along with those, there's a lot of special equipment, a lot of things that need to be brought into the country and developed in the country to carry out those services. But if you only have to carry them out for a short period of time, then the equipment or the resources, the competency may sit idle for a period of time. So that type of situation can, shy some business away from investing further, for example. So I think that's an important steady growth and a sustainable growth for the different industries that we are looking to support is, what I would say is an important aspect for us.
Right. And as we look to the future, green logistics is becoming a global trend, and as Dr. Yap just mentioned just now. So in your view, what are the further issues that need to be addressed to attract investment in this direction in Vietnam?
Well, I just saw today a news story that Vietjet Airlines had been the first service in Vietnam to use sustainable aviation fuel on a couple of their flights going out. So yeah, you see this topic of sustainability in transportation, whether it's for people or for cargo or whatever, is certainly a very hot topic. We have to recognize that Vietnam's journey, as it compares to, say, for example, Denmark, where DSV have our headquarters, we're at a much different phase in the journey. Where in Denmark we have a high level of renewable energy, we have high level of facilities with power plants that they build in the facilities. For example, they have solar panels on the roof, they have wind turbines on the logistics park, they're charging batteries, and then these batteries are in turn charging trucks and trailers that then make shuttle runs in between ports and different facilities. So this infrastructure and what is available already in Denmark compared to what we have in Vietnam, for example, is quite different. So for green logistics, it's all about the data that we collect at the forefront to create a baseline and a benchmark of how much emissions we're producing, and then looking at those practical solutions to minimize that and improve the situation. Now, if those also come along with some cost savings and efficiency gains, then they're an easy sell to bring into the market. If we start to look at other investments, for example, sustainable aviation fuel is quite expensive, so that requires a level of commitment from companies like DSV and also our customers. Then we have to see how the take up of that type of technology comes online. But if Vietnam can develop those industries that support sustainable logistics, more production of sustainable aviation fuel to bring the cost down comparably, then there will be more take up and usage of those kind of products.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. How about you, Dr. Yap? What is your view on the same matter? What issues do we need to address in order to attract investment? As an advocate for sustainability and green logistics, right? What's your take on this?
We certainly have to look at a couple of factors here. I think one of it will be talent development. As we green many different areas, I think we have to train new sustainability types of expertise, from energy transition to looking at how to manage some of these renewables, looking at monitoring them, at the same time tracking and predicting to a certain extent. And I think, we have to look at the tech people, we have to look at the data scientists, we have to look at the new engineers that we should bring in to operate some of these devices. And I think talent alone, it's a really big game or game changer per se, for Vietnam. And the skill sets, I would say, are also, I wouldn't say they are readily available in the world. This is still considered to be scarce, a scarce human resource around the world. So Vietnam can take the opportunity now to start building. You have a very young workforce, a young demographic. 25 to 35 years old. I think you have a significant number of them, and I think that with the right training, I think this can be a formidable force, and also at the same time, very concrete human capital for the industry, not just logistics industry. I also believe the other sectors will have a big part to play. Right.
And to expand on the idea of Vietnam being a regional hub, as we mentioned before, do you think a smart logistic network could be the key to positioning Vietnam as a major player in the global supply chain? And what conditions need to be met to make this a reality?
So I think apart from talent development, you have to look at critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure by itself is already part of the Logistics Performance Index, but at the same time, enabling infrastructure to be able to be connected to regional infrastructures. I think that is a key thing to look at, whether your trains are connected to other railways, whether your connectivity and supply chain flows have been already, I would say, cast in stone, or are they planned for? What are the contingency operations in the areas of supply chain disruptions, especially when we live in very volatile times today? How can we approach new types of approaches when we need certain food, when we need certain resources? How are these goods and services going to be developed, produced? and transferred over to the intended place. I think that all this needs to come in. And private sector can't do this alone. We will need government support in order to do this. So intergovernment cooperation and agency support is certainly required. I mean, without the areas of task force and also interagency support, I think this is an area which Vietnam can certainly capitalize on. And, you know, with its strategic location, I think this will be, again, a competitive advantage for the country.
And based on your experience so far with sustainable logistics, what are the challenges in quickly building a sustainable logistic ecosystems in Vietnam in terms of speed and efficiency? And what role does, can you elaborate more a little bit about what role does modern technology in enhancing the efficiency of the logistics system?
Yeah. I think in the areas of technology, we would have to look at technology transfer, technologies that have already been proven, you know, overseas. These can be hardware, this can be software, this can be the areas of warehouse management solutions, all the way, you know, to robotics, intelligent systems, intelligent operations, to retrieval systems that where you can transfer goods, you know, at a very high level, 5 to 6 stories, all automatic, and reducing capacity for manual labor, enhancing better human judgment, you know, per se. So in the areas of technology transfer is important, but at the same time, customization of new technologies cannot be ignored. We have to co-create new technologies, creating new marketplaces for logistics growth, bringing in the stakeholders, bringing in the SMEs, the small, medium enterprises, bringing in the financial institutions also as well, the banks, to be able to support this entire ecosystem. And that will create a new logistics marketplace, which in turn bring in more business, which in turn bring in more investor confidence. And of course, at the same time, we try to be as sustainable as we can to make this world a better place to live in.
Thank you. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that this is requires the collaboration between the private sector and the government as well, right? So in your opinion, what can the Vietnamese government do better to promote this kind of sustainable infrastructure logistically?
I think the first thing to do is to very quickly have a structured policy agenda. And with this policy agenda, you know, to move away from the bureaucracy and quickly bring in the business, quickly bring in the manpower, quickly bring in the technology, form a base. After the base, create, you know, a new center of excellence, whether it could be an AI center of excellence, a logistics center of excellence, and then from there, you know, multiply it, create a multiplier effect so that you can move across the provinces as soon as possible. And Vietnam being very concerted, you know, in its approach, especially with a very new, vibrant leadership that is in place right now. I think, you know, we'll be able to move many things. And also given its resilient history, I am certain, you know, and I'm very confident that private companies can come in as soon as possible and implement, you know, bring in some of their technologies and human resources as soon as possible so that we can speed up the logistics highway.
Thank you. And Mr. Eric, same question for you. From the business point of view, do you have any recommendations for the governments in terms of policy in order to promote sustainability in logistics?
Well, I think it's a collaborative approach on this topic. You know, we have many players on many different levels involved with developing something along these lines. I touched on it before. You know, getting the right data and having the right, you know, baseline of where we're starting with on a lot of the topics, and somehow creating more, you know, connectivity on that level across the industry. So it needs some collaboration from the government and the authorities. It needs collaboration from the logistics associations, from maybe universities that have some expertise in that area, and some of the businesses involved in the logistics, the asset owners, the ports, and then also the customers. So I think it's a team effort that's needed there to identify what the unique flavor of the topic is in Vietnam, and put some smart heads together to, you know, come up with some planning for the future.
Based on your experience working in Vietnam, if you have to measure up, how do you think what is the level of readiness that you assess for Vietnam to get to the level of sustainability readiness, like Denmark, like you mentioned earlier? Are we like close, or is there like a ranking system that we can work on?
Besides the logistics performance index, I think there's also the competitiveness index. I think the World Economic Forum has a very good set of criteria surrounding that. And I think you don't just look at technology, you look at ease of doing business, you look at policy implementation, you also look at how social population and businesses are reacting, to it, how businesses can quickly implement their services as soon as possible. I think that sort of business readiness has got to be ingrained, per se. And again, I think what I'm seeing now is that, first of all, there's a lot of growth prospects in Vietnam. I also see, a very dedicated government in place. And I think what really needs to be done now is policy implementation at the provincial level, so that businesses can carry out as soon as possible some of the tasks which they have committed for. And eventually, it will be the people who will benefit from this. It will be businesses that benefit from this. And this in turn can boost investor confidence. And quite frankly, you will need businesses, international companies to come into Vietnam, bringing their skill sets. And most importantly, for us in YCH, we have a philosophy which is to help businesses grow without growing pains.
Right.
Because we have already gone through the pain. And so we want to help other companies and countries also to alleviate some of the pains that are involved within this spectrum. And we believe that can be done. We have already helped many countries and many companies move forward within this, both international and local types of companies. And we think that the future ahead is very exciting. We are changing as we speak also from a large conglomerate now, moving into asset-driven types of companies such as the SuperPort, and then subsequently building up a regional portfolio in order to forward logistics within the region.
Thank you. And over to you, Mr. Eric. Is there any international lessons that you would share for Vietnam to quickly get to the point that we can develop a sustainable model for logistics supplies?
I like that Dr. Yan used the word competitiveness, in his answer, because actually Vietnam is not really competing with Denmark, for example, in many respects. So the better comparison will be, how competitive is Vietnam versus peers in the region here, versus nearshoring models or other developments such as those. So I think it's a great starting point now for Vietnam to look at it. There's, as I mentioned before, the inland waterways, for example, could be a huge comparative advantage as compared to another market where the main economic center is quite landlocked, for example. So how to develop those systems as an alternative to trucking cargo on a long distance, for example. So there are opportunities, but there's also a pressing need, because the new investors, whether they're logistics companies or whether they're manufacturing or whatever they are, they're looking not only at the financial metrics at the moment, they're also looking at those environmental metrics, because they have made those commitments to net zero or whatever it happens to be on their ESG reports or in various elements of business. So those need to also be supported by the infrastructure, the service provision, the competency, and the possibilities in Vietnam.
Right, thank you. And as we wrap up the discussion today, could you share a little bit about DSV's plans for Vietnam in the near future?
Yes, well, we've been a growing company here for a number of years, and our plans, our hopes are to continue growing in a sustainable and positive way in the market. We are looking at the topic of sustainability and what I mentioned before, having really an end-to-end measurement on the CO2 emissions, including all of the transportation operations, from picking up at a factory door all the way through to the final delivery. So we're building up our database and tools for that, which are also then giving customers an opportunity to see that information on their invoices next to their financial cost for the service and transaction. And we're focusing on certain industries here as well. I mentioned before, renewables and project cargo industries. We're focusing on the healthcare, pharmaceuticals, medical devices industry, and building up the know-how and competency to handle those products safely and securely. Consumer goods, electronics, semiconductors, for example, where we have a very strong capability globally and leveraging on that to make a delivery of those services locally. So that's just to name a few that we're focusing on and working with our customers to identify what they're looking for and then supporting that as much as possible.
How about you, Dr. Yap? Vietnam SuperPort is at the forefront of developing logistics in the region. Can you share some insights into your upcoming plans in Vietnam?
Yeah, certainly. I think we are taking a phased approach in us. We are focused on building a cargo terminal, which we already have at the current moment, expanding our operations, bringing in the best technology in order to increase cargo capacities, for Vietnam. And then subsequently, we will build a dry port or integrated terminal so that we can bring in containers, both from the north and the south. And then after that, start distributing them to their intended targeted places. And thereafter, we will look at also building a series of warehouses in order to store some of the goods that we tend to put, on a temporary basis or long-term basis. And with that, we do have the flexibility, as a multi-modal port to be able to store and to distribute, and at the same time, to build all in a single process, which is the basis of being multimodal itself.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Yap. That's very exciting. And with that very insightful response, we've come to the conclusion of our discussion today. It's been a pleasure hosting our esteemed guest speakers, both from key players in the sectors. It's clear that Vietnam's logistic industry is at a pivotal moment. Both Mr. Eric and Dr. Yap have highlighted the remarkable progress made in terms of infrastructure and the challenges that remain and the exciting opportunities ahead for businesses in this space. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, we're excited to announce that the second Logistics Summit organized by Vietnam Investment Review will take place on October 31st in Ho Chi Minh City. The summit will dive into the most pressing issues facing the industry, including new trends in modernizing infrastructure, enhancing supply chain efficiency, promoting digital transformation, and developing new business ideas models. Once again, we extend our heartfelt thanks to our honorable guests for joining us in our discussion today. And we wish both DSV and Vietnam SuperPort continued success in your growing contribution to the Vietnam's logistic ecosystem. And to our audience, thank you very much for watching. And we look forward to seeing you again at our future discussion and at the upcoming Vietnam Logistics Summits. Thank you and goodbye.